Let's be honest, how many of you actually put real maintenance needs before cosmetic mods on your car? Well, unfortunately, I'm guilty of it too. So today, we're gonna take care of something that honestly I should have taken care of long ago. As you can see, the current brakes on the car are completely shot. The pads completely worn down, and the rotors, there's not much left. The grooves are honestly deeper than the Grand Canyon at this point. So we really need to dive in and get these things taken care of so we can have a safe ride. First, we'll get started with the materials that we'll be using for today's project. That includes brake cleaner, microfibers, along with the VHT caliper paint. I did choose yellow since the car is red. I thought this would be a really good contrast. And then to top it off with the Spray Max 2K Clear, which will bring all of it together. We'll also be using stickers and some drop cloth as well. Next, jumping into the parts we'll be using, here we have the Z1 brake bleeder caps along with the Z1 brake pads for front and rear, and the front and rear rotors as well. I have the parts numbers, that way you can take a look at these and pick up your own if you'd like. But overall, really impressed with the quality of these. They look like great rotors. They are slotted and drilled, which I think will be a nice addition compared to the stock rotors that are on the car now. First things first, we'll go ahead and jack the car up and get the jack stands underneath it. Be sure to check out your manual on where the jack stand points are so that the car is safely secured in the air. After this, we can go ahead and start taking off the lug nuts to get the wheel and tire off of the car. Don't forget, with all the road grime, remember these sometimes can get stuck, so they need a little bit of motivation to get them off. With all four wheels and tires removed, we can now shift our attention to removing the brake calipers. When doing brakes, I've found that turning the steering wheel and using a breaker bar tends to work best rather than trying to get an impact in there and using all the ugga-duggas in the world and still not making any progress. Now that we have those caliper bolts broke free, we can shift our attention towards the brake line fitting. It is a 10 millimeter, so I just use a 10 millimeter wrench. I'm able to break that loose by hand and get the brake line removed. Now that we have the caliper bolts broken free with the breaker bar, we're able to use the impact to go ahead and run those bolts the rest of the way out, pull them out by hand to remove the caliper. Most rotors will tend to be stuck on the car. Again, with a lot of the road grime and corrosion, these things can get stuck. However, certain manufacturers, including Nissan, they've included a bolt on the face of the rotor. We can take out the spacer, screw it in, and actually use that bolt to break the rotor loose. With the front calipers and rotors removed, we can now shift our focus towards the back of the car. As you can see, I had to get a little creative with how I broke those caliper bolts loose since there's not a lot of room to work behind the caliper. Overall, I was able to have success. The brake line fitting was also a 10 millimeter on the rear, just like the front. However, there was a brake line bracket that utilized two 12 millimeter bolts that bolted to the back of the bracket. So you needed to remove those two bolts along with the brake line fitting, and then you were able to successfully remove the caliper. With the handbrake disengaged, the rear rotor should slide right off. this sucks, but these are definitely not the correct brakes for the car, so we're going to need to get this corrected. Finally, we are back, and as you can see from the previous clips, unfortunately, I purchased the wrong brakes. So the Nissan 370Z behind me, it turns out it's actually a sport model. When I purchased it, I was under the impression it was a base model. And to be honest, I never really cared what model it was because I planned to mod it and do a bunch of things that it never came with from the factory. Turns out sport models, they have nicer brakes, bigger brakes, which means we needed bigger pads and bigger rotors. So we ended up ordering those things separately. Here are the pad and rotor part numbers for the Sport Model 370 for those who are interested. Now that we have the correct pads and rotors, let's go ahead and jump back into the install exactly where we left off. With the brake calipers off of the car, I will be utilizing an ultrasonic cleaner with some purple degreaser to pull all of that brake dust right off of the calipers and have them looking clean. With all of the calipers clean, we are now going to get out our brown Scotch-Brite pad and start scuffing up those calipers. When you're not powder coating and you're using paint, it's very, very important that you get these things scratched up so that the paint adheres to the caliper as best as it possibly can. Make sure to get all of the crevices to do a really good job and have really good paint adhesion. We are now going to go ahead and jump straight into painting the calipers with the VHT caliper paint. The first coat of base I like to do very light. I look for 50% coverage, and then the next 2 to 3 coats will be a lot thicker, trying to really get as much coverage as I can, but also avoiding drips and runs. Now that I know I have larger brakes on the car, I decided to change the stickers, but if you're adding stickers, in between the base coat and the clear coat is ideally when you want to add them so that you can clear coat over them and protect those stickers so that they last long term. For those of you who have never used a 2K clear in an aerosol form, it comes with this little red plunger you can then put on the bottom of the can. There's a little stem hanging out. You will then depress this and it'll actually bust the bladder that's inside the can, mixing the catalyst with the hardener. And that's what gives you that really solid finish that you would get from a professional paint booth. With our 2K clear, I did about 2 to 3 coats with roughly 30 minutes in between those coats. And after a couple hours of drying, these things came out incredible and I'm stoked with how they look. I just wanted to make a quick interruption and say, if you're curious about any of the products that we're using in today's video, be sure to drop down in the description below and check those links out, and you can pick up the products that you see here in today's video. With the calipers all painted, we can now transition over to getting the new correct rotors on the car. When installing drilled and slotted rotors, be sure that you have them in the correct orientation, as most of these are directional. Additionally, be sure to keep an eye on your original hardware, as some of it may come over to the new ones as well. When doing the front rotors, I always like to add a lug nut onto the stud just to make sure that the rotor is sitting flat against the wheel hub. This really helps with putting the caliper on. If you have a European car like an Audi or a Volkswagen, then you have the lug bolt, and same concept, go ahead and screw those in and get that rotor against the face of the wheel hub. Now that we have the caliper back on, we're going to go ahead and put the caliper bolts in and get those tightened up, and then go ahead and grab your 10mm wrench and get that brake line put back on the caliper. When installing your brake pads, make sure that you use the brake grease. This seems like a very misstep whenever I talk to people about installing brake pads, but just take a little bit of grease. You don't need a lot. Put it on the back of the caliper or the brake pad, the part that's actually going to be touching the caliper piston. And then if you have new hardware, that is where this will come into play. I reused my hardware, threw it in the ultrasonic cleaner, cleaned it up, and ended up reusing it with the new brake pads. Now that we have the freshly painted calipers and the new rotors on the car, the next step that we're going to be doing is bleeding the brakes. In my opinion, bleeding the brakes is the worst part of this entire process, but you'll always want to start from the furthest caliper away from the car and slowly work your way towards the master cylinder. As you can see, I'm using a reservoir just put on the brake bleeder nipple. With another person in the car, they will pump the brakes several times. They'll hold it. I will take a wrench, crack open that nipple, wait for the air to come out, and then close it back up. And with the brakes bled, we are now done. I've gone ahead and thrown the wheels and tires back on the car, and as you can see, the yellow behind the silver wheels against the red looks absolutely incredible. I think next we really need to do something about the wheels. As you can see, they are absolutely filthy from the old brake pads, so we'll get that washed up and I'm sure it'll look incredible. All right guys, and that is it for today's video. If you liked what you see, be sure to drop below, hit the subscribe button, hit the like, and drop a comment of what you would like to see next on this 370Z build. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.